"The problem with you, Marcus," she said, not even looking me in the eye, "is that your entire approach belongs in the Reagan years." Her manicured hand slid the stack of papers across the polished mahogany desk like she was passing me a death sentence. Termination papers. Just like that. 10 years of my life, reduced to a manila folder and a dismissive quip. The clock on the wall ticked behind her, but the sound was drowned out by the rush of blood in my ears. She leaned back in her chair, eyes already moving to the next task on her screen, as if ending my career was no more significant than deleting an email. My name is Marcus Harlow. I'm 42 years old, and until that moment, I was Vice President of Business Development at Stratagem Global, a firm that had clawed its way from regional obscurity to international recognition on the back of one division, mine. I'd built that division from scratch, brick by brick, deal by deal, until it generated 70% of the company's total revenue stream. Not a rounding error. Not a department hanging on by subsidies. 70%. I thought that number meant job security. I thought wrong. The new CEO, Catherine Doyle, had been parachuted in 6 months earlier, with glossy magazine features hailing her as a visionary. A disruptor. She wore buzzwords like armor, wrapped herself in the language of going viral and breaking silos. The board had eaten it up, desperate to look modern. I'd watched her strut through the halls in designer heels, trailed by consultants half her age, talking about campaigns that sounded more like TikTok stunts than strategies. She wanted flash. I delivered fundamentals. She wanted noise. I gave results. In her eyes, that made me obsolete. I picked up the papers, skimmed the legalese I'd seen drafted for others, and closed the folder. No emotion showed on my face. Years of training myself to negotiate contracts worth hundreds of millions taught me one thing: never give your opponent a glimpse of your hand. My pulse might have been pounding, but I smiled, extended my hand across her desk. She hesitated a fraction of a second before shaking it. Her grip was cool, calculated, but I felt the faintest tremor. She had expected a protest, an outburst, some explosion of fury. Instead, she got silence. When you've given 10 years to a company, it becomes a kind of second home. I'd skipped vacations, missed anniversaries, worked holidays, because I believed in what we were building. I recruited my team like a general building an army. Men and women who were killers in their field, loyal not to corporate jargon, but to performance and integrity. Together, we had taken a near-bankrupt line of services and turned it into the crown jewel of Stratagem. Every quarter, the numbers spoke for us. Every year, bonuses proved our worth. And now, with one stroke of a pen, she was erasing it. Erasing me. I tucked the folder under my arm, stood, and adjusted my tie. Her eyes flicked up then, maybe searching for a crack, some hint of anger. I gave her nothing. The trick wasn't to fight back in that office. The trick was to leave her wondering why I wasn't fighting, to let her stew in the silence, asking herself what I might do next. Because Catherine Doyle had power, yes, but she didn't understand patience. She didn't understand strategy. Walking out of that office, past the glass walls that looked down on the city, I felt the weight of betrayal pressing against my ribs. Every late night, every closed deal, every sacrifice suddenly seemed like ammunition, not wasted effort. My shoes clicked against the tile floor of the executive corridor, and I didn't slow down. I didn't look back. There were no dramatic speeches, no parting shots, just silence. That silence was my first weapon. By the time I reached the elevator, the decision was already made. Catherine thought she had cut me loose. She thought she'd swept away the old guard to make room for her circus of influencers and viral campaigns. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that I never walked away from a battle without gathering intelligence first. She had just declared war, and I intended to fight it the only way I knew how. Not with words, not with rage, with facts. And when the facts were laid bare, she wouldn't just lose me, she'd lose everything. I walked the halls of Stratagem Global for what might have been the last time, but I moved slowly, deliberately, letting the silence settle into my bones. The junior staff glanced up when I passed, then quickly looked away, eyes flicking back to their monitors or the half-finished lattes on their desks. Nobody wanted to meet my gaze. They'd heard the whispers already. Catherine Doyle didn't waste time making her victories known. To them, I was a ghost still walking, a man already written out of the story but not yet gone from the building. The way they avoided me wasn't cruelty, it was fear. Fear of being marked by association. Fear of what happens when loyalty to the wrong person is punished. The company hadn't always been like this. When I first arrived a decade ago, Stratagem was bleeding out, revenue collapsing, morale in tatters. I'd built my team from the ground up, hand-picking talent like a commander forming a special forces unit. I didn't hire resumes. I hired grit. I trained them myself, drilled them on the fundamentals, until our division ran like a precision instrument. Deals closed because we never went in unprepared. Clients stayed because we delivered more than we promised. Within 3 years, our division was covering half the company's operating costs. By the 5th year, we were carrying 70% of total revenue. The board smiled and clapped me on the back, but my team knew who they owed their loyalty to. It wasn't Stratagem. It wasn't the brand. It was me. Catherine understood that from the moment she walked in. She didn't want a team that answered to anyone but her, and she saw me as the largest threat. She started by purging the old guard. Directors who had built their departments before she arrived, men and women who measured value in contracts and client retention instead of likes and hashtags. Every month, another office emptied, another seasoned leader replaced by some glossy hire from her orbit of consultants. The board called it fresh blood. I called it what it was, consolidation of power. But what unsettled me most wasn't the firings, it was the spending. I saw budgets balloon overnight for projects that had no foundation in reality. Millions poured into influencer campaigns, viral stunts that burned bright for a week and then vanished without a trace. Meanwhile, the clients that paid our salaries, the defense contractors, the multinational manufacturers, the institutions that actually signed 7-figure deals, were treated like relics. Catherine didn't want them. They were too boring, too traditional. She wanted splash, and splash is expensive. That night back in my office, I didn't clear out my things like a man finished. I started gathering. Old instincts took over, the same ones that had built my division into the powerhouse it was. Intel first, action later. I downloaded performance reports going back 2 years, cross-referenced expense accounts with actual revenue. I saved entire email threads, documenting every boast she'd made to the board about record-breaking engagement. I wasn't sure what I was looking for at first, only that my gut told me the numbers didn't add up. And then I found it. A trail hidden in the purchase orders, small at first, consulting fees routed to an outside agency with an unfamiliar name. Not one of our standard partners, not even on our approved vendor list. I dug deeper, cross-checking corporate filings. My stomach tightened when I saw the name. The agency was registered under a holding company Catherine Doyle herself had stock in. She wasn't just burning cash on bad ideas. She was funneling money directly into her own pockets through a shell vendor, padding her balance sheet while bleeding the company. I sat back in my chair, the glow of the monitor casting pale light across stacks of contracts and awards on my shelves. The picture was becoming clear. This wasn't just incompetence. It was theft, dressed up as innovation. She'd built a machine that rewarded her, no matter how badly it hurt stratagem. And the board, the same people who had trusted me for a decade, was blind to it. For a moment, I imagined storming back into her office, slamming the evidence down on her desk, demanding answers. But I knew better. Confrontation now would only warn her, give her time to cover her tracks. No, the smart move was patience. Let her dig the hole deeper. Let her believe she'd won. Every transaction, every email, every reckless promise would tighten the noose around her neck. So I didn't say a word. I left the office lights on, locked the door behind me, and walked through the darkened halls of a company I'd given everything to. To them, I was already a ghost. That was fine. Ghosts can move unseen. Ghosts can haunt. And Catherine Doyle had no idea just how haunted her empire was about to become. The announcement came in a calendar invite sent at midnight. Mandatory all-hands meeting, main auditorium, 10 a.m. sharp. Catherine Doyle didn't believe in subtlety. She wanted spectacle. The auditorium was packed when I slipped into the back row, staying in the shadows. I hadn't been officially terminated yet, my paperwork still winding its way through HR. So technically, I was allowed in the building. The irony was, the numbers that paid for the coffee in everyone's cup and the screens lighting up the stage all came from the division she was about to mock. Catherine swept onto the stage like she was headlining a concert, the spotlight catching the shimmer of her designer jacket. The crowd clapped, hesitant at first, then louder, when her inner circle led the applause. She smiled like a preacher soaking in devotion. "This company," she began, pacing across the stage, "is about to enter its most exciting chapter yet. The era of viral campaigns, influencer partnerships, and digital dominance." Her words rolled out rehearsed, practiced, polished by consultants. She clicked a remote, and the giant screen behind her filled with a highlight reel of social media clips, dancers holding product samples, hashtags flashing across neon backdrops, a 20-second ad stitched together from jump cuts and canned music. The room filled with forced laughter and polite nods. I looked at my old team, spread through the crowd. They didn't smile. They didn't clap. Their eyes found mine in the dim back corner, and for a moment, I saw the quiet fury there. They knew what 70% meant. They knew who kept the lights on. And yet, none of them spoke. Fear held their tongues. Catherine had been ruthless in firing anyone who questioned her. Silence had become survival. When the screen shifted to revenue charts, she paused for effect. Our so-called legacy division, she didn't even glance at me, is important, yes. But it represents the past. The future belongs here. She tapped the slide, a line shooting skyward on a chart labeled Projected Viral Growth. I nearly laughed. The numbers weren't just optimistic. They were fantasy. $1 billion revenue stream from influencer campaigns within 2 years? Impossible. Worse than impossible. Fraudulent. As her speech droned on, I found myself drifting back to my first meeting with the board 10 years earlier. I was 32, unproven, standing in that same auditorium in front of men and women who doubted whether stratagem could survive another recession. I told them I'd build a division that would endure market shocks, that would thrive even when bubbles burst. We didn't need flash. We needed resilience. And I had delivered. Through economic dips, trade wars, and budget freezes, My division had never missed its targets. I remembered the nods from board members, the relief in their faces when the first real profits returned. That memory stung now, a knife twisted by betrayal. After the meeting, I stayed behind, waiting until the crowd thinned. Catherine's presentation file was still cached on the shared drive, and I knew how to dig. Alone in my office, I pulled the slides and compared them to the internal reports I had archived. The discrepancies were glaring. Engagement numbers inflated by triple digits, revenue streams mislabeled to make losses look like gains, entire budgets siphoned into creative expenses, with no audit trail. It wasn't incompetence. It was deliberate. She was building a castle of lies and praying nobody asked to see the foundation. I was documenting everything when a knock at my door startled me. It was Daniel Rhodes, one of the last senior managers left from the old guard. He closed the door quietly, eyes flicking toward the hallway before he spoke. "You need to see this." He slid a flash drive across my desk like it was contraband. "Don't ask how I got it." When I opened the files, my chest tightened. Screenshots of Catherine's private Slack messages filled the screen. Her words dripped arrogance. "The board are fossils. Easy to manipulate. I'll flip this company in 2 years and cash out." Another message bragged about gutting the dead weight while funneling budget into her friends' agencies. There it was, spelled out in her own words. Contempt for the very people who trusted her. Greed written in digital ink. Daniel watched me, waiting for a reaction. I closed the folder and leaned back, keeping my face unreadable. He thought I would storm into the board's office right then, deliver the killing blow. But the knife wasn't sharp enough yet. Not yet. Evidence is ammunition, but timing decides the war. Catherine believed she was untouchable. I wanted her to believe that a little longer. So I thanked Daniel, locked the flash drive in my desk, and said nothing. The storm was coming, but for now, I let the silence grow. Because silence terrifies people like Catherine Doyle. It makes them wonder what's waiting in the dark. I treated the evidence the way a soldier treats ammunition, methodically, carefully, no wasted motion. Every receipt was a bullet, every email thread a chambered round. I printed transaction reports until the office copier groaned, stacked spreadsheets into neat piles, labeled every folder with a precision that bordered on obsession. My desk became an armory of paper, each piece sharp enough to cut through Catherine Doyle's polished lies. Screenshots of her Slack messages went into their own section, cross-referenced with financial ledgers and vendor invoices. I wanted redundancy. If she tried to deny one piece, 3 more would back it up. The dossier grew heavier by the hour, a weapon forged not from steel, but from facts. Late nights blurred into early mornings. The building emptied out, but my office light stayed on. I highlighted manipulated revenue projections, circled falsified engagement stats, and drew lines between budget transfers that bled millions into her shell agency. Every time my printer spat out another sheet, I thought of Catherine's smug smile in that auditorium, dismissing my work as legacy revenue. She thought I was finished. She thought wrong. Meanwhile, she was tightening her grip on the company. 2 more senior leaders were forced out, both veterans who'd survived downturns that would have buried lesser firms. Their offices were emptied overnight, replaced within days by influencer friends who posed for photos in the lobby like they'd just won a prize. The stock price slid in quiet increments, but Catherine brushed it off in board calls, blaming short-term market reactions, while promising explosive growth. I could feel the unease rippling through the upper floors. The whispers had started. Board members asked questions in hushed tones, glancing over shoulders before daring to voice concern. But Catherine silenced them with charm and numbers. Always numbers. The same ones I now knew were fiction. I stayed invisible, didn't leak to the press, didn't send anonymous tips. That would have been sloppy, noisy. Catherine would have spun it as sabotage. No, I wanted her confidence intact, her arrogance unbroken. A trap only works if the prey keeps walking forward. And she was marching straight toward the edge, blinded by her own ego. When the day of the quarterly board meeting arrived, I woke early, calm in the way I used to feel before walking into a high-stakes negotiation. The kind of calm that comes when you know every variable is controlled, every contingency planned. I wore the same navy suit I'd worn my first day at Stratagem. Call it superstition or symbolism. It reminded me who I was before Catherine turned the place into her stage. I slid the completed dossier into a leather briefcase. It was heavy in my hand, heavier in meaning. 10 years of loyalty, betrayal, and silence distilled into a single weapon. The boardroom was already buzzing when I stepped through the glass doors. Catherine was at the head of the table, radiant in her confidence, addressing the directors with a smile so wide it looked rehearsed. Her eyes found me instantly. Surprise flickered, then amusement. She tilted her head slightly, as if to say, "You don't belong here." I didn't break stride. I placed the briefcase on the polished table, unlatched it, and pulled out the first file. The room quieted as I slid it toward the center, then the second, then the third. The sound of paper against wood echoed like gunshots in the still air. Board members leaned forward, their expressions shifting from polite curiosity to something harder. Catherine's smile froze, just slightly, but enough for me to see the crack. I looked at her, then at the directors who had once trusted me to protect this company. My voice was steady, controlled, every word deliberate. "You fired me for being old school," I said, letting the silence stretch. Turns out, old school accounting still works. The silence after my words was heavier than the thick glass walls of that boardroom. Catherine tried to laugh, tried to summon that stage presence she used so well, but her voice cracked at the edges. "This is absurd," she said, gesturing toward the folders as if they were nothing but props. Old files. Taken out of context. He's bitter. You can all see that. But no one looked at me. They were staring at the documents spread across the polished table, the numbers highlighted in red, the connections drawn in neat lines that left no room for doubt. One director leaned forward, flipping through a stack of printouts. "These engagement figures. Catherine, they don't align with the internal reporting." His voice was steady, but laced with suspicion. Another pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose. "Vendor payouts? This agency isn't even on our approved list. Who authorized this?" Catherine sputtered, trying to regain control, insisting it was all part of innovative restructuring. But the more she spoke, the clearer it became that she was cornered. Her polished rhetoric collapsed against hard numbers that refused to bend. I didn't interrupt. I didn't need to. The dossier spoke louder than I ever could. Every receipt, every falsified projection, every email promising the board explosive viral growth was there in black and white. They shuffled papers, exchanged glances, and the room filled with a rising tension that Catherine couldn't charm away. Finally, the chairman set his hands flat on the table and said the words I'd been waiting for. "This company cannot tolerate this level of deception. Catherine, your tenure ends today." For the first time since she arrived at Stratagem, Catherine Doyle's smile vanished. Her face drained of color as two security officers entered quietly from the hallway. She rose from her chair, stammering about misunderstandings, about visions for the future, but the directors had already turned away. One by one, they closed their folders, signaling the verdict. The guards escorted her past the glass doors, her heels clicking sharp and frantic against the floor. Staff in the hallway froze as she passed, watching the queen of the company reduced to a disgraced figure under armed escort. The smirk that once owned every room was gone, replaced with a hollow stare. The chairman turned back to me, clearing his throat. "Marcus, we owe you an apology. The company owes you much more than that. If you're willing, we'd like you reinstated. Your leadership is exactly what Stratagem needs." The words landed with the weight of redemption, but I felt no pride, no urge to reclaim the chair she had stolen. 10 years of loyalty had already been spent. The house we built together had been poisoned. I shook my head. "No reinstatement," I said. "I don't want the title. What I want is closure." Negotiations were quick. They had no leverage, and they knew it. I asked for a severance package triple the original offer, and more importantly, I demanded ownership rights to the intellectual property my division had built. The systems, the contracts, the strategies, the backbone of that 70% revenue stream. They agreed without hesitation. For them, it was survival. For me, it was justice. In the days that followed, Catherine's empire collapsed like a house of cards. News of her termination spread through the industry with wildfire speed. Word of her self-dealing reached investors, clients, and competitors. Agencies cut ties overnight. Recruiters stopped returning her calls. Within a week, she was radioactive. No company in the sector would touch her name. I signed the final documents in the chairman's office, the ink drying on a settlement that secured my future and freed me from theirs. I left without fanfare, carrying nothing but the knowledge that she had destroyed herself the moment she underestimated me. The staff in the lobby watched me pass, not like a ghost this time, but like a man who had outlasted the storm. She fired me on a Tuesday. By Friday, she didn't have a career left to fire anyone from.